Well, thank you, Chris. It's been really a tremendous day, and I've learned a lot, and I'm delighted to be here speaking with you this afternoon. So I was sitting in my kitchen reading the newspaper on a Saturday morning, and I came across an article on creativity. And I learned that you can get your creative juices flowing by watching funny YouTube videos, sitting next to a cardboard box, or even surrounding yourself with the color blue. And I was really enjoying this article, but I paused when I got to the point where they began to equate creativity with innovation. And I thought, whoa, creativity can lead to art and music and sometimes innovation, but creativity is not innovation. So what is innovation? Well, as the Chief Innovation Officer of Boston Children's Hospital, that's a question I need to know the answer to. And I'd like to talk to you today about what innovation is and the innovation life cycle, how you build innovation programs within a healthcare organization, and share some examples from Boston Children's Hospital, and then conclude with a couple tips on how to build a culture of innovation. And I plan to actually stop twice during my remarks to take questions. So I'd really like to make this a conversation and share my thinking with you and hear from you. So what is innovation? Well, if you go to the dictionary, this is the definition you get. To innovate is to try out new ideas. And this definition doesn't actually say you succeed or build anything. And what I also like about it is it actually hints at the risk and uncertainty that's part and parcel of innovation. And in fact, failure is a big part of the innovation world. And I think this antonym is also great. If you're not innovating, you're dying. So I want to focus on clinical innovation. So what's clinical innovation? Well, if you look at the spectrum that begins with research that gets translated into patient care that needs to be coordinated with the business model, clinical innovation actually spans where research ends, gets coordinated with patient care, and actually also takes into account how you get paid. So I think clinical innovation includes everything from new drugs and devices to new forms of care, new care coordination models, new communication within the clinical setting between doctors and hospitals, as well as new payment models such as bundled care or accountable care organizations. So another important concept in understanding innovation is the innovation life cycle, which I developed to explain how innovation happens in a service industry. It's not exactly the life cycle that 3M might use to describe a product, but I think it's very helpful in understanding how innovation comes to happen in a healthcare and other service organization. And I'd like to examine each step a little bit more with you now. So the first step is initiation. And this is not a hard step, but it's an important step. And this is really where you identify the problem you want to solve. You create a vision for what you're going to innovate around. And this can be done at the grassroots level, for example, trying to figure out how to enhance access to a very busy dermatological clinic. Or it can be done at the strategic level, as our hospital is doing, trying to figure out how to enhance the patient experience before they're even admitted to the hospital. So this is the phase where you figure out your vision and your objective, and ideally you also figure out what your resources are and the scope of the project. The next step is ideation, coming up with new ideas. And unfortunately, some people actually confuse ideation with innovation. And ideation is not innovation. It's a piece of the life cycle. And there's a lot of ways to come up with new ideas to the solution you're trying to solve. One of the most common is brainstorming. And how many people have been involved in a brainstorming workshop or activity? Yeah, we all do it from time to time. But I also encourage innovators not just to brainstorm to come up with solutions, but also to look at what other industries are doing, because there can be inspiration from elsewhere, and we can get good ideas outside of healthcare. And to share an example with you of one innovator that got her inspiration from outside of healthcare We have a nurse at Boston Children's who's involved in cardiac surgery where children are actually cooled down during the process and then need to be rewarmed afterwards. And she didn't feel that the rewarming techniques that we had at hand were working all that well, and she wanted to come up with another way to rewarm the babies after surgery. So she thought, well, probably the solution involves a hat, since we lose 40% of our heat through our head. And so she was trying different ideas, and she came up with a knitted hat, and that didn't work so well. It sort of fell off the babies and weren't so easy to put on either. And it was actually while she was watching the Boston Marathon, and she saw the runners going across the finish line, and she saw that the runners would be given Mylar blankets to help warm up after the run, that she had the idea, Mylar, that's the material I need to use for my baby's hats. And so she came up with a new turban-style, Mylar-based hat for babies to use, to be put on the babies after they've been through their operation. And actually, the hat waits on the operating table and is put on afterwards. And she's now patented this idea and is in the process of doing a clinical trial to demonstrate the efficacy. So coming out of ideation, though, you harvest your best idea and you move on to the next stage, which is piloting. So this is where you're going to build and test out a functional mock-up. You're going to build a prototype. You're going to test out your ideas. And it's important in this stage to have clearly defined metrics and not sort of moving goalposts. And if you're going to fail, which we've talked about is a part of innovation, it's probably going to happen at this point. But as one of our panelists told us today in the investor panel, early cheap failure can actually be a form of success. And one of my favorite examples of early cheap failure comes from my days when I was the Vice President of Innovation and Advanced Technology at Kaiser Permanente. We were interested in coming up with a new process for medication administration. We had a lot of sort of competition around the Pyxis machines where people were getting their medication, the nurses were jostling. It wasn't a good process, and we needed something better. So we did some brainstorming, and we came up with the idea of adding a medication drawer to the carts that were being used for the computers to allow us to chart electronically. And we went out into our innovation lab, and we mocked this idea up. And what we quickly found within about 10 minutes was that our brilliant idea on paper was not very practical. And the reason for this was those carts that the nurses were using to chart electronically and were moving from room to room were a little bit heavy to start with. But when we added our medication drawer and 25 pounds of our favorite medication, we created something that was really heavy and really hard for them to move. We basically had created a boat anchor. So this was not a good solution. We went back to the drawing board and came up with something completely different. But what we subsequently learned was that these carts were available commercially, and had we bought them or had we built our own, we would have spent millions of dollars outfitting our hospitals with the solution that was destined to failure. So this was an example of an early, cheap failure actually being a form of success for us. And I think there's another learning in here. Before you actually go to pilot or mock-up, you may want to actually see what's commercially available to see if you actually have a new idea. So in the ideal world, you've had a successful pilot, you tell people about your great idea, and they all just start using it. In the real world, where I think most of us live, it's actually pretty hard to get people to adopt new ideas, to change how they're doing things. And so I've coined the term for this diffusion gap of moving from pilot to operationalization. I call it the operationalization gap, or O gap. And there's a number of, well, let me talk about where you see O gaps first. So who suffers from the O gap? Well, usually big organizations, less of an issue with startups, and organizations that have a lot of leadership nodes. So you don't see as much of a problem with the O gap in organizations that really have sort of command and control leadership, think maybe the US military. But in other big academic medical centers and other places, the O gap is alive and well. So what can you do to close the O gap? Well, there's a lot of levers you can bring to bear. One thing you can do is to re-engage leadership, get them involved, bring resources into the situation, focus on change management, education, invest in communication. Sometimes actually the O-gap is technical in nature. You've built a prototype that's worked well for maybe 5 or 10 people, but it's not going to be able to scale across a large enterprise. So you actually have to go back and rebuild your prototype. But probably the most valuable thing in closing the O-gap is recognizing its existence and knowing it's there. And I advise the innovators that I work with actually to get the folks who are going to be involved in operationalization into the process much earlier. Get them involved in ideation. Show them what the pilot is. Because I think that, more than anything, will shrink your O-gap. And goodness knows the O-gap's been around for a long time. We heard from Will Yu this morning that it took over 260 years for the cure for scurvy to actually get operationalized across the folks that needed to use it. So I really like this cartoon. What it really says is sometimes getting across the O-gap is harder than getting out to market. So once you are across the O-gap, then you're into the operationalization phase, and this is really where the new idea has been diffused and deployed broadly, and it's where an organization finally is realizing the full value of the new innovation. But that's not the last step. Actually, once the idea or innovation is in the hands of the end users, there's an opportunity to optimize it. And we see this all the time. We see end users sort of adding their own personalized tweaks to this new innovation. Now, no life cycle goes on forever, and at some point, you need to obsolete this great innovation and potentially start over again. And this can be because workflow has changed, or there's a new, cheaper technology available. And this is a little bit of a messy phase. It's hard to know exactly when to obsolete something. It's also hard to know how, whether to sunset the old innovation slowly or send it out with a big bang. And I like this cartoon too. It says, and this light here lets you know when the camera is obsolete. And I think it would be really fabulous if all our innovations came with this kind of light. So let me pause here and take some questions. I'm happy to talk about anything about the innovation life cycle. If you want to ask me how I came up with this idea, or what my favorite phase is in the innovation life cycle. I know you're not supposed to have favorites, but these are not kids. These are just innovation life cycle phases. So I would welcome your questions. And just remember, I really can't see anything, so.
Okay, a quick question. In organizations, how do you keep that knowledge within the organization so that people learn from what was done and it's not lost? And yeah.
It's a great question. So communication and sharing are absolutely vital. If you have innovators working in silos, that's not very effective for the whole organization. And we run a number of programs, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, for how we encourage innovators to share what they're working on and share their learnings, because communication and sharing is absolutely vital if you're going to have a learning innovation organization.
Hi. Within structures like healthcare organizations that are so risk averse, how do you encourage or build a structure that fosters the idea that fast failure is okay and even welcome as a form of success?
So that's a great question, and I'm actually going to go into some detail in the last part of my talk about how you build an innovation culture. I think there's 4 key elements, which I'll save for a few minutes, but I do think that the role of the CEO is really very important. I think it's extremely difficult to create a culture of innovation if you don't have your top leadership willing to embrace change, to accept failure, and to recognize that those failures are actually learning opportunities. And there's a couple other elements which I'll touch on in a few minutes. Okay.
Yeah, how do you incentivize innovation?
So also a great question that goes to the question of innovation culture. And I think that Many people are innovators at heart. They see a problem, they want to fix it, they want to do something about it. So they're willing to start innovating. What you really need to do more than incentivizing them is to create an atmosphere where it's comfortable, convenient, and possible to be an innovator. So to me, that's about providing resources. It's about providing recognition and rewarding hard work. I don't think you need to pay your innovators more. I don't think you need to pay them to think creatively. I think there are people out there that are willing to do this and love to do this. It's really about creating the environment that is conducive to innovation. And I'll talk again in a few minutes about some of the ways to do that. Okay, we'll take one more question.
Especially in the university environment, is there something called too much innovation?
Well, I can't say that I've ever encountered too much innovation. Certainly in our academic medical center, we have a lot of research going on, which is not the same as innovation. But I think within healthcare, we have so many challenges, and there's so many things that are broken that there's a lot of opportunity for innovation. So I can't, at this point, tell you an example of too much innovation. I'd love to get there one day, though. All right, well, I think we'll have some more time for questions at the end. I want to move through a couple more segments. I think you're all sort of becoming innovation experts at this point and understanding the innovation life cycle. So next, I want to really introduce you to Boston Children's Hospital. We are a 395-bed pediatric specialty hospital. We are the pediatric teaching hospital for Harvard Medical School, and we have over 225 specialized clinical programs, including cardiac surgery, a program in autism, a program in vascular anomalies, and even pain management. And in addition to really outstanding care, we are the leading pediatric research facility in the world. We invest more than $225 million every year in basic and clinical research. And if I can brag for a minute, we were voted the #1 pediatric hospital 2 years in a row in 2011 and 2012 by U.S. News and World Report. So I want to spend a minute talking about Boston Children's Hospital's very rich history of innovation. We were founded in 1865, and I would say we've been innovating ever since. In 1891, our laboratory was the first to produce bacteria-free milk for the kids that were in our hospital. In 1947, one of our doctors, Dr. Sidney Farber, was the first person ever to put leukemia into remission, and Dr. Farber went on to found the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. 1952 was the year that Dr. John Enders and his colleagues won the Nobel Prize for isolating the polio virus, and it really was this work that laid the framework that allowed Jonas Salk to go on to produce the polio vaccination and help eradicate that terrible disease. In 1971, Dr. Judah Folkman, again, one of our physicians, and his team came up with the groundbreaking idea of angiogenesis. They discovered that tumors need a source of blood in order to grow, and it really was this discovery that's opened up a whole new cancer-fighting strategy. Now, I could probably go on for the rest of the evening and well into the cocktail hour with examples of innovation just since 1971 to the present at Boston Children's Hospital, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to actually focus on what we're doing today, and I want to spend a few minutes talking about our Innovation Acceleration Program that I lead. Our mission is to enhance the innovation culture at Boston Children's, and we do that by taking a three-pronged approach. First of all, we're trying to identify unmet innovation opportunities and catalyze work in that area. So we are interested in initiating innovation. Second of all, we really want to facilitate grassroots innovation, so supporting innovators who want to test and develop new ideas. So we facilitate innovation. And then finally, we work and collaborate on institutional innovation initiatives that are large and very impactful. So let me give you a couple of examples of our work in each of these areas. In terms of initiation, so There's been a lot of talk already, and we just had a great panel on the potential for mobile apps to really change the face of healthcare. And you won't be surprised when I tell you Boston Children's Hospital was not any different in terms of the excitement level that we saw among people that wanted to use iPhones and iPads to enhance the clinical physician's experience and also for patient-facing purposes. And people came to us, and we didn't have the resources to actually build all the mobile apps that people had ideas for. But what we said we could do to help the innovator was we could create an innovation community for them. And so we have facilitated and created the Mobile Apps Working Group. And this is a group of people that are interested in mobile apps. Some have built them, some are building them, some are thinking about building them, that meets regularly to really teach and learn from each other and to communicate and share best practices. And we've had a number of really interesting mobile apps built at Boston Children's Hospital. There's now an app for the patient and their family in their room that wants to know what's being served in the cafeteria downstairs. We have a new wayfinding mobile app that helps patients and their families navigate through the hospital to get to their clinic or to their lab that they need to go to. And we even have a mobile app under development right now that facilitates autistic children communicating better. We're very interested in building the community that supports the innovators. And to the question a little while ago, one of the ways we do this is through our innovation forum. This is a monthly forum where we invite innovators to come in and talk about what they're working on and for the community to give them feedback. And it's been a great way for people to connect. We have had some amazing presentations, including from one of our pediatric urologists who's developing an implantable artificial kidney. We heard from a cardiac fellow who has developed a light-activated glue to help close the holes that sometimes babies are born with in their heart. And we even heard from our head of parking about his innovative work to try to get the cars back from valet parking more quickly to our patients and their families. We also have created a platform to support innovators who want to connect with each other virtually. We have a social networking virtual collaboration platform we call Spark. And Spark stands for the Social Platform for Accelerating Resources and Connections. And this is a place where innovators can find each other, they can find resources, they can blog, they can tweet, they can share documents, videos, they can participate in virtual conversations. And it's really a wonderful sort of internal social media solution for our innovators. And it's actually also being used for workflow enhancement in other parts of the organization that aren't even interested in innovation. Now, I mentioned earlier that not all pilots are successful, and our first attempt at Spark didn't work all that well. We brought in a technology platform that didn't have really the full range of feature functionality that our innovators and end users were looking for. So in January, we brought in a new platform, this time an open source Joomla-based platform. We migrated over all the content and the 1,000 users that we had at that time and are now using sort of our second pilot. And I'll tell you, this one's going a lot better, and I think this might be the one we're going to stick with. Just to give you an example of how we're using it in the world of innovation, we ran a crowdsourcing competition over the course of 5 days where we invited the community to come and post their ideas. And we had about 30 ideas that were posted and some very extensive commentary on those ideas, and over 3,000 votes were cast during our Idea Lab competition. The Idea Lab is open all the time, but this was a way to really drive adoption and show people the power of Spark. So let me talk a little bit about the resources we're providing to facilitate grassroots innovation. For people that think they might want to be innovators and aren't sure how to get started, we run Innovation Bootcamp. This is a 2-hour workshop where they can come in, learn about innovation, hear about what resources are available to them at Boston Children's, and also hear war stories from experienced innovators about how they navigated the waters and were successful and what lessons they learned. It's also very important to provide resources to innovators, and so we have a seed grant fund program, our investment grants that are available to innovators, and we have funded 19 projects to date. Some of them have been successful and others have not, which is what we would expect. For our innovators who have an idea that involves the development of software, we tell them not to apply for an investment grant award, but rather to apply to our Fast Track Innovation in Technology program, our FIT award. And what the FIT award is not a monetary award, but an award of time, actually of developers' time. And if you win a FIT award, our developers will sit with you and build out the proof of concept that you need to go and test out and see if your idea will actually work. We have built several different solutions. One of them was a digital smart board to replace the grease boards that we have on all of our floors in the hospital that have the patient's name, their room number, their doctor, the doctor's phone number, and a little bit of clinical information. This is not a great communication tool, as you can imagine. It wasn't updated in real time. You had to be standing right in front of it in order to actually get anything out of it. So we created a digital solution, one that actually pulled information constantly from our bed management system, pulled clinical information from our electronic medical record, and was available not just digitally when you were standing in front of it, but throughout the hospital via the electronic medical record. And I can't tell you how popular this was. It was a great success, and in fact, this has now been operationalized and deployed broadly across our hospital. And to share one other FIT award program with you, we are in the process of building something that we call My Passport. And this is a digital passport to support kids and their families when they are admitted to the hospital, to help them really get access to the information they need while they're in the hospital. So they can access their test results. They're displayed in a very user-friendly way. They can see pictures of their care team, which is often changing a group of people. There's a place where they can record the questions they want to ask their doctor the next time they see them. And it's possible to digitally see their discharge information when it's time. And our goal here really is to make that journey through the hospital a better experience for our patients. So let me just talk a little bit about what we're doing in the collaboration area internally. So for those of you that heard me speak earlier, you know that telehealth is an area of great strategic innovation interest to our hospital. We really see telehealth as a paradigm shift in the way care is going to be delivered. And the opportunity at Boston Children's Hospital is really broken down into three main areas. First of all, the opportunity to deliver care directly to our patients virtually, so connecting with them when they're at home or at school to provide care. Secondly, to connect clinicians virtually, to leverage technology so that clinicians can connect with each other, not just face-to-face or by telephone. And third, in the area of teleeducation. And we have initiatives and pilots going on in all of these areas. And telehealth is actually one area where we aren't just facilitating innovation, but we're actually helping to drive it within the organization. And one of our other collaborative activities is a program that I call the Innovation Ambassadors, where we have gotten an innovation liaison from each of our clinical departments to work with our team. And these folks really help identify the innovators in their department, figure out what the trends are, help us identify emerging opportunities, and then also take our resources out to the folks they work with. So speaking of my team, I want to introduce you briefly to the folks that do this work. We're not a group of superstar innovators. We are really about facilitating innovation. I work closely with Dr. Pedro Del Nido, who's our chief of cardiac surgery and really our clinical thought partner. The rest of the team has really been hired to meet the needs so that we can run these programs. So we have developers on our team, we have telehealth experts, we have someone who manages our Spark platform full-time. But we're really there to facilitate innovation and to support the doctors, the nurses, the administrators, anyone who has an innovation idea. And I like to think of us as the dream Sherpas of Boston Children's Hospital. So let me just stop again here for a minute and see if there are any questions about the programs that we are running at Boston Children's.
Have you done any work in terms of innovation and financial management?
So the question is around, have we done any work in innovation in financial management? So obviously this is a huge area of opportunity in healthcare and for providers in general. We're pretty focused on clinical innovation, but we are experimenting with new payment models. We are part of what's called the alternative quality contract with one of our payers to try to look at how we can take on risk for certain episodes of care and certain populations. So we are very much recognizing that there is a changing ecosystem and that financial innovation in how we get paid is going to be critical. And certainly in the area of telehealth, where that's not a type of care that is typically paid for today, we know that we're going to need more innovation. Yes?
What kind of resources is the hospital devoted to this program, both in terms of manpower and financial?
Well, you've met the team. There's about 8 of us, so that's the hospital commitment in terms of manpower. We're all full-time except Dr. Del Nido, who needs to do surgery full-time. But the hospital has provided the resources for the grants, so that comes through the hospital. And then we have space, we have access to whoever we need within the hospital. So it's really been a very well-resourced and very well-supported program, and I think we're extremely privileged in that sense. And I'll take one more question. Yes?
My question simply is that in terms of the disposition to chronic diseases in children, is there any work that goes on given that you're a children's hospital?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Like children, my question is there any work being done on predisposition to chronic disease in children?
So the question is around chronic disease in children. So we think there's a huge opportunity in the telehealth area to really tele-enable the management of chronic conditions. And we actually think there's 2 categories of opportunity for us. One is what we would sort of call ambulatory chronic condition management, so supporting kids with diabetes and asthma, which are very significant, and connecting with them at home so that we can track them at home, we can get information back on how their conditions are doing. And if we can manage them remotely, we can often intervene earlier before they have a serious episode and end up in the hospital. So huge area of opportunity there among sort of the ambulatory chronic conditions. And then the other area within chronic conditions is what we call complex chronic conditions. And these are kids that either have a number of chronic conditions or they have conditions like cystic fibrosis, where, again, they would really benefit for some intensive follow-up. Our transplant patients also fall into that category, and they are in many, many times post-transplant for follow-up visits. And again, we think there's a huge opportunity to go and take the care to the patient rather than always requiring them to come in to the doctor. So we're very much exploring the opportunity to apply and leverage telehealth to that population. Okay, well, let me move on to the last portion of my talk today. I wanted to talk about how you build a culture of innovation, and I think there's some interest in this topic. I think there's 4 key elements that you need to really build and sustain an innovation culture. And so I've come up with this mnemonic I call the 4 R's for the innovation culture, and I want to walk you through these 4 R's. So the first one is recognizing the process and really understanding how innovation happens. Understanding the innovation life cycle and the role it plays. And this can be very valuable to an organization in figuring out where to place their bets and where to source their resources, as well as for an innovator to understand the process they're going through and what to expect as they pursue their innovation. The second R is resourcing innovators. Innovators need time, they need money, they need support. And I've given you some examples of how we are supporting our innovators at Boston Children's Hospital. And I would say that most of the resources that we're deploying right now are really focused on supporting innovators in the ideation and in the pilot phase. We do a lot of advising and counseling around the OGAP, and I think that's another place where we hope to have resources in the future. The third R is risk-taking. So we've talked about how innovation is fundamentally risky and there's no guarantee of success, and that failure is often a part of the innovation process. And the issue really is how an organization deals with failure that is inherent to the innovation process. Do they tolerate risk-taking? Do they embrace failure? Do they provide a safe environment for an innovator who has made a mistake or has had a failed idea? It's really important for organizations to recognize that failure is actually a learning opportunity and not to punish innovators when their idea doesn't pan out. And finally, the fourth R has to do with rewarding and appreciating innovators. You know, innovation is actually really hard work. It's not easy to come up with a new idea, test it out, go through the innovation life cycle. I was talking to one of our innovators who has developed injectable microbubbles to deliver oxygen to the bloodstream when breathing is impaired. And he told me he's on the 300th iteration of that idea. So innovation is hard, and if you want to create a culture of innovation, you need to really recognize that it's hard work, and you need to reward innovators for what they're doing. And so in order to enhance our culture of recognition of our innovators, we hosted our first annual Innovation Day back in February. And this was an opportunity. We invited 17 innovators to come in and present the work that they were doing and to share it not just with the children's community, but with the community at large. We had a standing room only crowd of 200 people attend in person, as well as almost 200 people log on online to join us. And this was hosted by our president and our CEO, and it really was a chance for us to recognize the hard work of our innovators, to give them a platform to share, but also to really shine. And our innovators really appreciated the opportunity. We had great press from this event, both about the event and about the work the innovators were doing. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is, if you're trying to build an innovation culture, to take time to recognize those innovators who are trying so very hard. So in conclusion, I would say that innovation is one of the most talked about topics in healthcare and in business in general. But innovation doesn't happen by chance. It's governed by a predictable life cycle that has 6 stages and a gap. And I've talked to you about how we at Boston Children's Hospital are building our innovation program and bringing resources to bear. So if you're thinking about innovating, you don't need to go watch a funny YouTube video or sit next to a cardboard box or paint your whole room blue. What you really need to do is embrace risk, provide resources such as time and money, recognize and reward innovators in your midst, and understand the role of the innovation life cycle. So I'm happy to take some questions now about innovation. You can also reach me via email or follow me on Twitter. I tweet frequently about innovation, and I'd love to hear from you. But at this point, I would like to open it up to questions again about building an innovation culture, about our programs at Boston Children's, and any questions that you may have about the innovation life cycle. Thank you.
I have just one suggestion.
Yes.
Recognize the folks who adopt the innovation as well, so that you don't have a system that looks like we only love the folks who come up with these great new ideas. Recognize the folks who adopt them and use them as well.
I think that's a great suggestion. And when we operationalize our digital whiteboard, which is actually called the Alice Project, we focus not just on the people who came up with the ideas, but the nurses who were embracing them, as well as the IT department that had done the work to scale that up to an enterprise level. But you're right, innovation is absolutely a team sport, and everyone needs recognition because it's not easy for anyone. Another question over here?
What are some of the metrics that you measure innovation with? And another question is, just from a nomenclature standpoint, how do you separate invention and innovation? Thank you.
All right, so 2 questions. Innovation versus invention. Invention is a new idea. Usually we think of an invention as a device. or a product. For me, innovation includes invention because it also includes new processes, new ways of doing things. So I think innovation encompasses invention, and innovation has a life cycle and a lot of different steps. Invention is really coming up with that particular device or solution. In terms of metrics, it's a great question. So we have a number of ways that we track the impact of our innovations. One way is to really recognize that innovation is a process and to do sort of process metrics. How many ideas have been initiated? How many ideas have actually made it to pilot phase? What's gotten across the OGAP? Obviously, it's a funnel, but we like to track our funnel, and we think that's one of the great ways to show the impact of our program. And then sort of within some of the programs, we also collect metrics. So as an example, with our Innovestment Grant Program, we look at how many applicants we got, how much money was requested, how much we actually gave out, which departments were involved, and then, of course, what were the outcomes of the work that was done, who published, who got a patent, what was operationalized. So I think there's a lot of ways to collect metrics, and we try to do them all. The question in the back, yes?
A lot of pediatric disease or illnesses from obstetrics, the birthing process. Do you cover that area as well, upstream of peds?
So we are not actually an obstetric hospital. We don't.
Right.
Babies are not delivered at our hospital, but we do have a lot of work going on in what we call advanced fetal care. So prenatally, getting involved. There's been some very innovative surgeries that have been developed at Boston Children's. So we sort of engage with the baby before they're born, and then very much so after they're born. We work with various NICUs, have our own, and are always looking for innovations that will help children.
Thank you.
Yes. You can wait for the mic, that's fine.
Many organizations say that they are in favor of innovation, but when push comes to shove, they're really in favor of predictability, stability, and profitability. And ultimately, organizations show where their priorities are by how they behave. Back in the good old days of Hewlett-Packard, when 25, 30 years ago, when it was one of the great innovating organizations in the world, it was said that the culture there was that a engineer could actually go to a production line and get the production line to stop if he needed to test something, because they understood that innovation was the lifeblood of the company, and it was more important to get that innovation tested than to keep the line running. Maybe apocryphal, maybe not, but it's a good myth. I'm curious, what do you think about, how do you see the overall culture at Boston Children's really supporting innovation? When push comes to shove, to what extent are people willing to disrupt their stability and their predictability to try innovative things?
So it's a great question. So I think we have a couple of things going for us at Boston Children's. First of all, obviously a long history of innovation, as well as being a research institute. So people are used to asking questions and struggling with new ideas. But I do really feel that we walk the walk and talk the talk when it comes to innovation. And that means a lot of disruption. It means going onto the floors and tearing out the whiteboards and putting in new technology. We, of course, still wrestle with the OGAP. We have people that don't want to change, and I think this is, again, where you need leadership at the highest level to say this is important to us. It's part of how we define who we are. We are innovative, and we have to keep moving. Steve Jobs had a great quote. He said, innovation is what separates the leader from the follower. And I think once as an organization you have committed to being a leader in your field, you are by definition committing yourself to innovation. So I don't think it's a choice, but I think it's something that requires a lot of support at the leadership level. And I think continuous reminding, this is important to us, we want to do this. May make you a little uncomfortable when we actually adopt something new, but it's worth it, and it's an investment. And one of the things that we come back to and is very helpful at Boston Children's is we're there to take care of the kids. We're there to provide the best possible care. And I think if we can keep people focused on that mission, it helps them get over their nervousness or agitation around trying something new. Okay, I think I'm out of time, so I want to thank you all for the opportunity to speak and hand the mic back to Chris.